May 11, 1945, dawned quietly over Dingalan Bay, Luzon in the Philippines. The warm morning air carried the faint scent of salt from the nearby sea, and the forest surrounding the small Allied camp seemed almost serene, concealing the danger that would soon erupt. Private John McKinney, a young man from Georgia, lay in his tent, the weight of war momentarily lifted as he rested. At just 23, McKinney had already experienced the rigors of combat, yet nothing could have prepared him for the events that would unfold that morning. Born the son of a sharecropper, McKinney had grown up in the fields of rural Georgia, learning early how to track, hunt, and survive in the wilderness. His skills with a rifle were unmatched in his local community. He could take down a deer or rabbit with a single, precise shot, and he had spent countless hours observing the habits of animals, predicting their every move. Little did anyone know that these abilities, honed in peace and quiet, would soon become instruments of survival in a far more violent and deadly environment. The 123rd Infantry Regiment had been stationed in Luzon for weeks, preparing for the final push against entrenched Japanese forces. Morale varied among the men, but McKinney, like many of his comrades, carried the tension silently, relying on routine to steady his nerves. He inspected his gear meticulously each morning, making sure his M1 rifle was clean and ready, bullets carefully counted and organized. It was a habit born of discipline, yet also instinct, a blend of army training and the instinctual caution of a lifelong hunter. The camp itself seemed deceptively calm. Soldiers moved about quietly, tents lined up in neat rows, occasional laughter breaking the silence. Birds chirped from the nearby trees, a sound that seemed almost out of place amidst the lingering smell of gunpowder and wet earth. But McKinney knew better than to trust appearances. The Japanese were skilled at deception, capable of striking where least expected, and rumors of enemy movements had been circulating among the men for days. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig could signal danger. McKinney's mind wandered, as it often did, to the forests back home, to the rhythm of stalking game and waiting for the perfect moment to act. Those lessons, learned in quiet woods and open fields, were now strangely relevant in a place so far from Georgia, so different from hunting deer or rabbits. Survival in Luzon demanded the same patience, the same observation, the same understanding of motion and instinct, but on a scale far deadlier than he had ever imagined. As he stretched and adjusted the blanket over his shoulders, he thought about his training, about the manuals and rules drilled into him since joining the army. Yet he also knew that those rules would not always save him. Sometimes instinct had to guide action. He had already seen friends fall to surprise attacks, their lives extinguished before any order could reach them. McKinney understood that in moments of crisis, hesitation could be fatal. The difference between life and death often came down to a single decision made in an instant. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the camp, and a gentle breeze whispered through the tents. McKinney could hear distant movements, perhaps footsteps, or the wind shifting through the trees. Every sense was alert, every muscle tense, even though nothing had yet happened. It was in these quiet moments of anticipation, that the mind sharpens, that awareness heightens. He was ready, though he did not yet know how desperately that readiness would be tested. And then, without warning, the calm would shatter. What seemed like an ordinary day in a remote part of Luzon would erupt into chaos, and John McKinney's life and the lives of those around him would be changed forever. In just a matter of minutes, a simple morning routine, a moment of rest, would become the prelude to one of the most astonishing feats of individual bravery in the Pacific theater of World War II. For now, though, he lay in the quiet of his tent, the world seemingly ordinary, the day stretching ahead with the deceptive promise of peace. But McKinney's instincts, honed over years of observation, patience, and survival, told him that something was coming, something that would test every skill he had ever learned and push him to the edge of human endurance. In the forested shadows of Luzon, the hunter was about to become a warrior.
The morning calm shattered in an instant. A flash of movement, too fast to react to, and a sharp, cold pain tore through McKinney's ear. A Japanese sergeant had slashed the flap of his tent and, in a single brutal motion, cut part of his ear. Blood ran hot and fast, dripping down the side of his face. Pain flared, but there was no time to think, no time to process. Only action could keep him alive. McKinney's training, his instincts, everything he had learned in the fields of Georgia and the drills of the Army converged in that single moment. His hands went to his rifle automatically, gripping the M1 with a strength born of adrenaline. The sergeant's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and McKinney brought the butt of his rifle down with deadly precision. The attacker crumpled to the ground. The sound echoed like a drumbeat in the stillness, announcing that the war had arrived at his tent in full force. Then he saw them. Shadows moving through the perimeter, more than 50, maybe 100 Japanese soldiers, advancing with a terrifying mix of discipline and fury. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to retreat, to wait for backup. Every rule drilled into him during Army training said to hold position, to seek cover, to call for reinforcements. But the life he had known in the Georgia woods, the lessons of survival, of patience, of acting before the prey acts, told him something different. McKinney's mind raced. He had faced enemy fire before, but never like this, never so close, never so personal. This was not a distant skirmish or a battlefield hundreds of yards away. This was immediate. This was hand-to-hand combat waiting to happen, an avalanche of enemies pouring into his space, and he was alone. He swung the M1 up, scanning the advancing soldiers with a hunter's focus. Time slowed. Each movement, each flash of uniform, each glint of metal became a marker. He had hunted deer and rabbits by reading movement, by predicting the unseen. Now he would hunt men, and the stakes were unimaginably higher. One wrong move, one hesitation, and he would die. The first wave of soldiers hit the tent. McKinney fired point blank, his rifle biting into the attackers with brutal efficiency. Some he struck with bullets, others with the butt of his rifle, fighting hand to hand when they breached the perimeter. He moved with a lethal rhythm, ducking, firing, striking, never stopping. Pain throbbed in his ear, adrenaline coursed through his veins, but he barely registered it. Survival demanded focus, and focus left no room for fear. Minutes stretched like hours. The enemy pressed again and again, wave after wave, each surge more desperate than the last. McKinney counted in instinct, not numbers. Each movement, each shot, each strike had to be precise. He remembered the lessons of his youth: anticipate, remain calm, strike with certainty. Every swing, every pull of the trigger, every movement was calculated. He was not just fighting to repel the enemy, he was fighting to survive, to turn the tide of this small but brutal confrontation. Around him, chaos erupted. Tents tore, earth churned, and shouts mingled with gunfire. Yet McKinney remained a singular force amidst it all, a storm of deadly precision. He moved like a shadow, striking before the enemy could react. His hunting instincts, once used to track animals, now allowed him to predict human behavior with uncanny accuracy. One soldier lunged too close. McKinney spun and drove the rifle butt into his chest. Another raised his bayonet, only to meet a perfectly timed shot. Time blurred. 36 minutes of relentless combat lay ahead. But in this first wave, McKinney proved one truth. Even alone, even against overwhelming odds, a man armed with skill, instinct, and determination could turn chaos into control. And as the enemy pressed on, unaware of the storm they had unleashed, McKinney prepared himself for the long, deadly fight that would cement his place as one of the Pacific's most extraordinary soldiers. By the end of this first onslaught, bodies littered the ground. McKinney's breathing was heavy, his body screaming in protest, but his resolve never wavered. The fight was far from over. Reinforcements were nowhere in sight, and the enemy would not relent. Yet he stood, rifle in hand, a Georgia farm boy turned one-man army, ready to meet whatever came next with the instincts of a hunter and the courage of a soldier.
The first wave of attackers had barely cleared when McKinney realized the full scale of what he was facing. The enemy numbered at least 100, a relentless force moving toward him with a deadly purpose. Most soldiers would have panicked, would have sought cover or waited for reinforcements, but McKinney was no ordinary soldier. His mind, sharpened by years of hunting in Georgia's forests, calculated each movement, each possible threat, each opportunity. He understood something crucial. Hesitation here meant death. He steadied his M1 rifle, scanning the advancing lines. The enemy was disciplined, moving in tight formations, their rifles and bayonets ready. They expected fear. They expected confusion. Instead, they found a single man, calm, deliberate, and utterly focused. McKinney had always relied on patience in the field, waiting for the perfect shot, reading the slightest hint of movement. Now, the same principles applied, but with far more lethal stakes. The first soldiers reached the perimeter, breaking through the low defenses of the tent area. McKinney opened fire, the M1 barking with sharp authority. Point-blank shots tore through the advancing lines, and each bullet found its mark. Some of the attackers fell before they even realized what had hit them. Others pressed forward, unaware that McKinney's deadly rhythm had already accounted for them. When bullets weren't enough, he used the butt of his rifle, striking with precision and force honed by years of close encounters in hunting. Time seemed to stretch. Every second mattered. Every movement had to be calculated. McKinney ducked behind a torn section of his tent, then pivoted, firing, striking, moving again. The jungle around him was alive with chaos, the snap of twigs, the bark of gunfire, the guttural shouts of men. He moved like a shadow, appearing where the enemy least expected, vanishing before they could strike back. His body ached, his ear throbbed, but the pain was secondary. Survival demanded total focus, and focus left no room for fear. One Japanese soldier lunged at him with a bayonet, a glint of steel flashing in the morning sun. McKinney sidestepped, swung the rifle butt with brutal precision, and the man crumpled. Another came from the side and he fired point blank. Another, trying to flank him, never had a chance. Wave after wave approached, yet each time McKinney adapted. He used the terrain, the tents, even the scattered supplies to channel the enemy into predictable paths. He became more than a soldier. He became a force of nature, relentless and precise. Minutes passed, yet it felt like hours. Exhaustion threatened to overtake him, but McKinney had trained for endurance in ways few could imagine. His hunting trips in Georgia had taught him to move silently for hours, to stay hidden, to anticipate motion. Now, those same lessons allowed him to read the soldiers' movements, to predict where they would strike, to react before the threat even fully formed. Every kill, every strike reinforced his control over the chaos. Bodies fell around him. 41 soldiers would eventually lie dead, but in this moment, McKinney did not count. He could not. Counting would slow him. He was a hunter at the peak of focus, every instinct tuned to survival and precision. He moved seamlessly between firing and hand-to-hand combat, each action deliberate, each strike fatal. The enemy's numbers were staggering, but McKinney's mind saw patterns, saw opportunities where others would see only danger. The forest itself seemed to bend to his will. Trees provided cover, shadows masked movement. The uneven ground forced the enemy into awkward approaches. McKinney exploited every advantage. He knew where the next wave would hit, and he prepared for it. He fired first, he struck first, and he survived. Each decision was a dance with death, each movement a testament to the sharp instincts of a hunter transformed into a one-man army.
As the minutes dragged on, McKinney became a whirlwind of lethal precision. He had no backup, no reinforcements, no escape, yet he pressed on, relentless, unstoppable, fueled by a combination of fear, adrenaline, and unyielding determination. By the end of the fight, the perimeter was littered with bodies. The enemy had been repelled, and McKinney had survived against overwhelming odds. It was a moment that would define him, a moment where instinct, courage, and skill converged into something extraordinary. Alone, facing almost impossible odds, John McKinney had become a legend, a symbol of what a single determined man could achieve when all else seemed lost. The forest fell silent again, the echoes of gunfire fading, but the story of that day would resonate far beyond Luzon, far beyond the battlefield, becoming a testament to human courage and survival.
The fight raged on, each second stretching into eternity as McKinney faced wave after wave of attackers. The perimeter was alive with motion. Japanese soldiers pressed forward, relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. McKinney moved like a shadow, ducking, firing, striking, never allowing himself a moment to pause. The pain in his ear throbbed, his muscles burned, but survival demanded every ounce of his focus. Retreat was impossible, and surrender was not an option. He fired point blank, each shot precise, each bullet finding its mark with the unerring accuracy of a lifelong hunter. The rifle butt became an extension of his body, a weapon of devastating power in close quarters. One soldier lunged, bayonet raised, only to collapse beneath a swift strike. Another tried to flank him, but McKinney anticipated every move, every step, every breath. His instincts guided him as surely as any training, perhaps even more so. Time became irrelevant. Minutes blurred together as the forest, the tents, and the jungle became both battlefield and ally. McKinney used every object at his disposal, every shadow, every uneven slope to channel the enemy into positions he could control. He fired, he struck, he moved, never stopping, never hesitating. For 36 minutes he fought a battle that would seem impossible to anyone watching. Yet he survived, not by luck, but by a combination of skill, instinct, and determination that left no room for error. The enemy pressed relentlessly. Soldiers came in waves, shouting orders, charging with bayonets and rifles. McKinney's rhythm never faltered. He fired, reloaded, struck with his rifle butt, pivoted, and fired again. Each movement was fluid, precise, almost like a dance of death. He had learned patience from tracking animals in Georgia, and now that patience allowed him to strike at the perfect moment to exploit every mistake the enemy made. Some attackers fell to the first shot, others he dispatched with the rifle butt or in hand-to-hand combat. Each kill required focus, timing, and a cold calculation. McKinney did not falter. Every decision mattered. Every hesitation could mean his death. The forest was alive with chaos, flashes of uniform, the roar of gunfire, the shouts of men. But in the center of it all, McKinney remained a singular force, one man facing impossible odds, moving with the precision of a predator. As the fight dragged on, exhaustion began to press on him, but he ignored it. His breathing was heavy, his body screaming for rest, yet he could not stop. The enemy was relentless, pressing closer with each wave. McKinney adapted, moving constantly, using the terrain and the environment to his advantage. He anticipated attacks, predicted movement, struck before the enemy could react. The forest became both shield and weapon, guiding the attackers into positions he could control. He fired, he struck, he moved, never stopping, never hesitating. For 36 minutes he fought a battle that would seem impossible to anyone watching. Yet he survived, not by luck, but by a combination of skill, instinct, and determination that left no room for error. It was a battle unlike any other, a testament to the extraordinary capacity of a single human being to confront overwhelming odds, a
Alone, John McKinney had turned chaos into control, fear into lethal focus, and the impossible into reality. The forest fell silent once more, the echoes of gunfire fading into the distance, but the legend of what had occurred would live forever. For McKinney, it was not about glory, it was about survival, about proving that training, instinct, and courage could overcome even the most overwhelming force.
The forest fell silent, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves and the soft groans of the wounded. McKinney stood among the aftermath, his M1 rifle still in hand, body tense, muscles screaming from the strain of nearly 40 minutes of relentless combat. Around him lay the evidence of an impossible fight. 41 Japanese soldiers, fallen where they had charged, scattered across the ground. It was a scene that seemed almost unreal, a testament to both the ferocity of the attack and the extraordinary skill of one man who had refused to yield. Reinforcements arrived cautiously, their eyes widening at what they saw. The perimeter, once swarming with enemy forces, was now eerily quiet. Soldiers moved among the bodies, checking for signs of survivors, their expressions a mix of disbelief and awe. They had expected to find a chaotic mess, perhaps a fallen comrade or two, but the scale of McKinney's defense defied imagination. One man, alone, had faced overwhelming odds and emerged not just alive, but victorious. McKinney himself barely had time to process what had happened. Adrenaline still coursed through his veins, masking pain and exhaustion. His ear, partially severed, throbbed painfully, but he ignored it, focusing instead on ensuring that the remaining enemy was accounted for and that his fellow soldiers were safe. In that moment, he was still a protector, a soldier carrying out his duty even after performing feats that would define his legacy. News of his actions spread quickly through the regiment and eventually through the entire army. McKinney became a symbol of courage, skill, and determination. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the Georgia farm boy who had faced 100 Japanese soldiers alone, who had relied not on luck but on training, instinct, and sheer willpower. His story inspired others, showing that even in the darkest moments, one person could change the course of events through bravery and precision. The aftermath was also a time of reflection. McKinney thought about the line between instinct and training, between life and death. He remembered the countless hours tracking deer and rabbits in Georgia, the patience and observation that seemed mundane at the time. Those skills, honed in peace and quiet, had become life-saving tools in a world of violence. It was a reminder that courage is often rooted in preparation, and survival comes from understanding both the environment and oneself. Later, McKinney would receive recognition for his actions, but the accolades never defined him. What mattered was the fact that he had survived, that he had protected his comrades, and that he had faced death with unwavering focus. His life would never be the same. The battlefield had marked him, shaped him, and proven that human determination could stand against overwhelming odds. Historians and military analysts would later study the battle, analyzing how one man could hold his ground against such numbers. They noted his use of terrain, his mastery of the M1 rifle, his ability to switch seamlessly between ranged and hand-to-hand combat. But beyond tactics, what stood out was his mindset, calm under fire, precise in action, and relentless in pursuit of survival. It was a lesson in courage, adaptability, and the extraordinary potential of the human spirit. As McKinney returned to base, the weight of the battle began to settle on him. The adrenaline faded, and the reality of what he had endured came into focus. Pain, fatigue, and a sense of disbelief mingled with pride and relief. He had faced death, stared into the eyes of overwhelming force, and emerged victorious.
The forest would recover, the battle would fade into history, but the legend of that day, the story of the man who fought alone and killed 41 enemies in 36 minutes, would endure. For John McKinney, the events of May 11, 1945, were more than a single day of combat. They were a testament to his courage, his instincts, and his ability to act decisively in the face of unimaginable danger. His story became part of the larger narrative of the Pacific Theater, a reminder that even in the chaos of war, extraordinary acts of bravery can shine through. And as the years passed, his legend grew, inspiring future generations to recognize that the combination of skill, determination, and courage can make one man capable of facing impossible odds and surviving.